name's Vay and you're watching AI Evolved, and in today's live stream we're going to be going over how you can use Midjourney to create what is going to be a capsule preview. Capsule is a fashion term for campaign, and we've got our character from last week's live stream, or 2 weeks ago from today, and she was created with Midjourney. So if you want to, of course, check out that process, you can do so. Go to my channel and see my last live streams with that. But here's what we're going to get into in the next 30 minutes or so. I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter than that, of course, because I'm mindful of you guys. Of course, you may not necessarily have the time to stay for 30 minutes or longer, so I'll try to keep it a bit short. So I'm going to be going into who's presenting, a little bit about myself, the hidden money pit. So we're a lean, quote unquote, 90-day lookbook, burns through 12 to 16k before a single sale. Now, these figures that I'll be pulling out during this particular live stream, I've researched with the help of O3, mind you, but they're still accurate in terms of the links and the data that is presented here in today's live stream. Then the AI alternative, so one Midjourney and Kling workflow that cuts the bill by 72% and ships in as quick as 72 hours, worst case 1 week. And these particular creatives that I'd created here, this one on the left in Midjourney, was created, and that was Anya there, as you can see, and then on the right that was the animated version in Kling here. So if we go there, you'll see there's Anya there on the left, the original image, and then unfortunately the person on the right is not quite Anya, but yeah, so I just cropped that and just kept Anya only there. So there's that. Then we're gonna go through proof of big brands already using specifically AI avatars. So big brands like fashion houses like Levi and H&M, but then also smaller fashion labels like Mango, Casablanca, Sheep Inc. Then I'm going to be introducing you to my F.O.C.A.L framework. So this was originally for photographic purposes. Of course, fashion photography fits within that remit of that. So that's why I'm going to be showing you that. And it's just 5 decisions to choose from if you think of each letter representing roughly 20%. So if you have like a maximum 3 letters, that does most of the heavy lifting when it comes to Midjourney version 7 versus Midjourney version 6, and you'll see why that's the case. So 5 decisions that lock in color, lighting, and angles. Then a quick like live prompt demo, so 4 prompts only, 4 production ready prompts that you can of course use, and then ROI math anyone can copy. So if you're a creative freelance watching this and you want to add, let's say, AI fashion related services to your specific suite of services, then this will be helpful to you to present to clients, because it will give you what you should think of from a commercial standpoint when presenting your offer to clients. And this will of course help you convert them more, but then also if you are a business owner, it will help you understand my process for when I create a specific Midjourney creative. I don't just think in terms of just this visual merit alone. I think of how does it tie into the commercial objective as well. And then lastly, some closing words and a quick offer as well that I've got for you at the end. So is this session right for you? Let's get into it then. So perfect fit for if you are an indie fashion founder ready to launch capsules faster. Like I said at the start of this live stream, capsule is basically a term for campaign. So 90-day campaign or product launch, if you think of it like that, without chasing photographers or paying between 12 to 16k for every shoot. Or if you are a solo Shopify or Etsy store owner who want elevated visuals without the studio chaos. And if you are also part of a small e-com team that tests new styles constantly, needs more creatives as part of that, and you need them to be turned around in as soon as a week or under. It's also a strong fit for if you are a freelancer or agency wanting to offer AI lookbooks as part of your creative or marketing packages, or for brands that are already running TikTok or Meta ads. You know, when you run lots of ads, you need to, of course, keep changing out your creatives very, very frequently. So it's imperative that you have a system and tool and framework like F.O.C.A.L so you can do that and basically create one character like I'll show you here quickly with Anya, and you can just have her in multiple different, of course, environments. So these are videos, of course, but then I'll show you the images now. So just one character's face and then multiple different images, of course, and these are all studio grade ready. So in fashion photography, you get something called PDP and PLP. Well, this is in e-commerce in general, but it can be applied to, of course, fashion photography. So PDP is product detail page. So when you go to a specific site like COS and you click on an item, this would be the PDP. So you see the price there, £160. You see the specific model in different poses. That's called a PDP, right? So that's really important to pay attention to. That, especially when advertising, it's not going to be ideal for enterprise brands that have like lofty budgets or in-house production teams already, or for fantasy art prompters. I know a lot of you guys are into that on this channel. That's what I've been covering previously anyway, a few fantasy art styles. So it's going to be more commercial grade in today's live stream. So just pay attention to that there. And if that's not, of course, relevant to you, then of course you can click away now. That's not a problem. So a little bit about me then. So I'm a growth marketer turned Gen AI specialist. I've helped scale multiple B2C and B2B brands over 5 years and managed 6 figures in ad spend over that time. Most recently, I drove an apps acquisition efforts from 30k to 150,000 app installs, and I delivered recently a 58k go-to market strategy for a client, which yielded 482% ROAS across 90 days using the exact F.O.C.A.L framework that you will learn in today's session. Recently, I had finished working with an e-commerce client and I generated $6,000 in online sales for a product launch within 7 days, entirely from Midjourney generated visuals. My mission is to make AI-based consistent character modeling as part of marketing photoshoots as normal and as profitable as email marketing. Of course, email marketing from a commercial standpoint is the most profitable channel out of them all. Once you acquire a user, for you to sell them your services or for you to sell them anything further down the line is much more lucrative than it would be to try and acquire a new user. So that's something referred to as LTV, lifetime value of a client or a customer, as opposed to just a one-off cost per acquisition, as it would be if you are always trying to get someone new in the door as part of your business. So that's my mission there. Okay, so let's get into why traditional shoots blow the budget then. So this one was created with Kling, so let me show you that quickly before I get into that. So this was more of like a cinematic image that I tried to create of Anya. Of course, the eyes are a little bit messed up, so it's not always perfect, and that's why I want to show you F.O.C.A.L today, so you can, of course, minimize the chances of that particular thing happening. So you can see here it's really good and more polished compared to that. So, okay, let's get into it then. So it's too many moving parts, right? You're chasing the photographer, the models, the stylist, and the studio all at once. One late email could mean the whole thing slips a week. Then there's those sneaky extra costs. So if you need to, let's say, pay for a stylist or a taxi, that's another line item that gets added to the bill. That can be very costly. Then there's the endless waiting. So you can shoot on Monday, but then you still haven't seen edits until 2 weeks later. And you're going to know why it takes so long in the second, because it usually does take about 4 weeks, right? For all things from a traditional standpoint to get in order and for you to get like the final product ready in terms of images that you'd be happy for in advertising for your store. Then you have to pay more for every single tweak. So let's say you need a last minute change, like a plus size model to advertise it for a larger size, garment size, or a different color coat. That's going to be another booking and yet another invoice, right? Or another line item added to the existing invoice. Then there's going to be missed momentum. So a rainy day or a sick model can wipe out your slot. Stock sits in boxes while competitors flood the feed. This also goes into PLP as well. So as part of e-commerce, of course, I showed you the PDP, which is the actual landing page. PLP would just be like you click on a category and you just see loads of different items here, as we can see. This is consistent character, by the way, just on another note, this particular woman. But PLP would just be like a product listing page. So you can see multiple categories here. So you can imagine by you missing momentum, especially let's say if you're in the fast fashion space and you need creatives really quickly, because you've like gone down the traditional road and you've waited, your competitors could have already flooded the feed, right? And so therefore you'll be losing the chance to make revenue as a particular business owner. And also flat visuals. So because you have a fixed scope, a fixed project budget, you can't just like change things on the fly like you can with Midjourney. Like for instance here, we had this one image created of Anya. I'll just zoom out so you can see the initial image. So this was the initial image of Anya that we created as a face, like a base face. And then just with this one image, we can create all of these different shoots that you're seeing. So you can't do that, of course, if you go down the traditional route. It's very difficult for you to do that. So these are all commercially ready. So that's something there. So bottom line is, even a lean 3-month capsule soaks up between 12 to 16k and a solid month of your launch calendar. So let's see, where do all of these costs go before getting into the nitty gritty of Midjourney. So where does it all go? So first it goes on the photographer and gear. You're looking at 3k to 5k for a full day. So that's the rate, the kit and the edits. Then models, you don't just want one model, you want a variety of models to keep it engaging and to, of course, advertise your product in the best light as possible. So that costs between $2,000 to $3,000. Then there's the stylist and the hair and makeup team, so HMUA it's referred to as well. That's $2,000. Then there's a studio or permit, about $1,000 a day in a major US city like New York or Los Angeles. Then you got the short promo videos. Now these are just like 15 to 30-second clips, guys, right? Things like these, right? They cost thousands of dollars to make, to have like an actual crew behind to do for you. So yeah, mad costs. Then you got the little extras, including couriers, ironing time, which is also referred to as steaming or de-steaming in this space, catering and insurance, which should cost you like $1,000 upwards as well. So total for a tight budget, right, is like 12 to 16,000 and 4 weeks of calendar time. Now, the AI scenario that we're going to get into with Midjourney and the workflow, that costs 70% or more less, and it could be delivered in as quick as 72 hours. So here's what 4.5k could get you and what it unlocks. So Midjourney and Kling bundle, 4.5k with 72-hour turnaround. Any size of skin tone is just a prompt away, whereas a traditional photo shoot would roughly add around 11.5k to the bill on top. So keep that in mind, that 11.5k. And here's what it can do as an indie and boutique founder. So you could redirect the 11.5k you'd usually burn on studio overhead into extra inventory, so more product lines or more SKUs. Micro influencers, so these are influencers between 10 to 100k in following, or a new colorway, so different like colors for your particular product. While the 24 image capsule is live in 72 hours instead of 4 weeks. Even worst case, let's say 1 week, right, that is live in and not 72 hours. That's still a 75% reduction compared to a traditional photo shoot. So crazy. As a solo store manager, you can get 24 polished stills and 4 reels that you can remix into dozens of daily posts. We just showed that with Anya there. You can get her in multiple posts. So this was one, like emulating the style of Cos. But, you know, there's so many different posts that you can get. And you can use something called Upscale Subtle and Upscale Creative on the right-hand side. So you can just keep creating more and more images of the same particular model that you have in mind. So you can do that very easily. And then as a freelance creative, the majority of you guys that would be watching this particular live stream after the fact, you can add like a 30-image AI lookbook to your services with a 1-week turnaround that lets clients skip through all the studio chaos and provides a new revenue stream, all powered by the same F.O.C.A.L framework that you'll learn in today's session. So let's go into who's already betting. So these are the big brands that are already using generative AI. So Levi's is testing La La Land.ai avatars for body diverse product pages. Then you've got Mango, that's produced its Sunset Dream campaign entirely with generative AI. And then you've got Casablanca that created Spring Summer 23 capsule with visuals in Midjourney there. And then you've got Sheep Inc. as well that mixed real knitwear with photo real AI sheep. So I don't know if that person itself was also AI generated, but the sheep definitely look like they're AI generated as well. So there is that. Then you got H&M as well. They're building 30 digital twins. So this is replications of their real life models, basically. So H&M is working in partnership with models and their respective modeling agencies to craft digital twins of 30 models, Business of Fashion.com reports. The resulting AI-generated imagery will be used in real ad campaigns this year in typical settings like social media or poster marketing efforts. The trick is that the clothes on offer will be worn by digital twins created by inputting multiple photos of the models, taken from different angles and in different lighting, into an AI tool that then generates the on-screen image. So we know that big names are already using AI, but if you don't have a specific methodology like F.O.C.A.L, your images can look like this. Right, so this is Anya, And I don't know if she's actually like chewing the invoices or they're just randomly placed on her face. Like, I don't get what's going on. So it's obviously craziness was happening there, right? Unstructured prompts can make things look weird like that, where people look fake or just things don't add up, right? So you solve that with using F.O.C.A.L. So let's get into F.O.C.A.L now. So F.O.C.A.L is broken down into 5 different letters, right? And therefore 5 different things for you to consider when going for your specific prompt that you have in mind. So frame and composition, we start there. Frame is typically the overall image, and composition are all of the elements that make up that specific images. So frame can happen in a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is like a wider aspect ratio. So you and I would typically be watching videos on YouTube with the 16:9 aspect ratio. And then likewise, the opposite of that, 9:16 aspect ratio would be the aspect ratio that you and I would be, of course, using or interacting with the most when we're using an app on our phone. Okay, so there's that. Then composition, an example here in this particular image, you can see the rule of thirds that leads to the focal point of the image, or one of the grid lines in this case. And then in the other grid line, the subject is there. Rule of thirds, I'll just show you quickly to illustrate, because there's typically 2 grid lines, and then the subject can be placed either side of those grid lines. So that would be using the rule of thirds. So here we can see this particular dog is on that right side of the grid line. So that's using the composition technique of the rule of thirds there. So that would form as part of composition, as part of frame and composition, the first letter of the specific acronym. So you can choose from portrait or landscape, anchor the model on the rule of thirds line, and then add leading lines and balance negative space. Balance negative space is basically, let's say the subject was in the center there, and there will be balanced negative space around it, i.e. nothing else in the background. Usually that's best demonstrated by portraits. So we can see there's balanced negative space with Anya there, either side of her. There's balanced negative space. That's an example there. Then we get into optimal lighting. So typically how it works is you get a 3-pointed lighting setup in most studios. So you have like the key light there, you have a rim light here, this little guy here, right? That's a rim light. And then you have something called like a background light. So I've put it behind the camera. Usually you'd have it behind the subject, and it could create some nice ambience there. So how you set that up is really important in being able to highlight certain either facial features of the subject or portray the subject in a specific way. So if you have, let's say, a rim light only, and you don't have the key light, or you don't have a background light, you just have the rim light shined at a specific subject's face at a particular angle, let's say 45-degree angle, you'll be accentuating certain features of the subject, and it'll be more, it's called hard rim lighting or hard light. So that will really like accentuate certain features of the face. So that's something to pay attention to there. Then you get the camera angle. So eye level feels more candid. So if I was to like go up a little bit, that's a bit more eye level. Likewise, when we deal with low angle, we can really put the subject in a powerful light. And likewise, when it's high angle, it makes us feel more empathetic towards the particular subject in question. So that would be high angle there. Then attire and aesthetics, of course, our character Anya here, I just said like a camel wool trench over charcoal dress and jumper, and that's a great illustration of that. So every frame matches that. So you want to, of course, include that as part of A. Almost every fashion prompt is going to include A there as part of it, because you're going to always specify the specific attire that the person is wearing, unless you, of course, use style reference, and then there's less of a need to do that. But I typically find that both explicitly mentioning it in your prompt as well as using style reference of a flat lay of that particular garment of what she's wearing can really help drive home the point. Then you get lens and technicals. So the perfect mix of millimeter combined with f1.2 or f1.5, etc., can mean that you get that blurry bokeh effect, as well as enough light being naturally let into the lens without having to tinker with something called the ISO, which is an additional thing that people tinker with when they want to control light within a camera. So here we've got a 50mm f1.2 for dreamy style bokeh and an 85mm f2 for razor sharp studio portraits. So we can see behind her there's a lot of bokeh going on, but then her face is in a lot of focus as well. So that's an example there of 85mm f2 for that razor sharp studio portrait. I've not tinkered with the ISO in this case because I didn't need to, and portrait grain is basically that kind of grain you get on an editorial shoot, which I'll show you now quickly. This was here. So I had made this image initially in Midjourney and then upscaled it and done some color correction here. So you can see this has got that editorial feel with it if I compare them both. So that's an example there of that like portrait grain-esque type of keyword and how that actually plays out with an image. Okay. So now you have like all of the basics down in terms of F.O.C.A.L. Let's get into the prompt workflow planning. Okay, so the mini brief is having 4 neutral looks. So this is going to consist of, this is also referred to as a swatch, by the way. So like a color palette, if you think of as being a swatch in the world of fashion photography. So consisting of camel, charcoal, sage green, and dove grey, all studio lit. Going to demo 1 still look per live. Then later the same prompts, if this were to be a real campaign, would be expanded out into a 24 still and 4 real launch pack. The budget goal for the client is for it to be under 5K. That's for the campaign in its entirety. I'm just showing you a preview here. And then would be delivered within the single workday for the drafts, some of the drafts at least, or of course the main campaign in its entirety, 72 hours to best case, but worst case would be 1 week with Midjourney V7. And then of course, ensuring the KPI alignment with those particular images when they're delivered is really important. So if I go back to here, the KPI alignment for something like this, which is very lifestyle oriented and aspirational, would be impressions, which is indicative of reach, and CTR, which is indicative of click-through rate. So the amount of people that see this particular image versus the amount of people that click it and go to the product page. So that would be something to bear in mind in terms of the KPI, because we don't just produce images for the sake of them looking pretty, we produce them with a commercial goal in mind. Whereas if you see on any like page, on any homepage of a website, the main images would be very, very aspirational driven, because we're just trying to get the prospect to click on the image and go to the actual products. Whereas when you go to a particular product, it's a very boring studio lit image because it's focused more on just the garments themselves and the details behind the clothing. They're not trying to sell you aspiration here. Notice that difference. This is called a PDP. They're not trying to sell you aspiration here. They're just trying to tell you about the product in more detail. So it's very boring and clean cut imagery. So that's something to keep in mind. So with that done, then this is how the workflow steps would break down. So confirming the references, the color swatches, the placements, and the commercial objectives. Then moving on to writing the 4 base prompts for the scoot, with a max of 3 F.O.C.A.L letters each, then rendering in Midjourney V7, locking in the model's face with Omni reference, and then quality control with color correction and grading, and as well as like gigapixel upscaling, and then cutting 4 cling reels from the best frames, and then upscaling those videos as well and delivering the download links to the client. So all throughout, my team and I would be applying the 1% rule. So all of these particular images that you've seen here of Anya, there is a lot of images, so much so that if you look to the right of this, you can see how small the scroll bar is. So many of these images were created, and a lot of them, even if I was using the F.O.C.A.L framework, not a lot of them, but some of them didn't come out the greatest, right? I tried to do something so intricate as much as doing like a trench coat image, but it didn't do that good with the detailing. So I tried to get around this by using shorter prompts, and you will see why that actually works. Typically 20 to 25 words in your prompt works really well, along with the F.O.C.A.L framework. But that's just an example there, multiple different images. And using the 1% rule, so only picking the 1 best image from 100 images for a particular shoot. So let's get into the prompt demonstration then. So the first one was a trench coat. So this isn't exactly the same, but it was inspired from Burberry. So if I zoom in, you will see the flat lay of the Burberry coat. And then we of course see Anya there replicating a similar style, although the color grading is off a little bit. And that's fixable in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom, where you basically highlight the subject and mask each individual area. So her coat, for instance, you could use that coat provided everything else is the same, with all of the buttons and everything to match the same color. Okay, so if you're prompting in Midjourney and it doesn't come out exactly how you want it, you can of course change that in post-production. That's not a problem there. So that's an example there. So how this comes about as a prompt then is the frame, which is the image, okay, then the camera angle and the attire. So a full body triptych. Triptych basically is a term for one subject or one outfit across 3 different frames. So think of that as a triptych. Triptych. Tick. So that's like a triptych, right? One subject, multiple different frames. That's an example of a triptych. And that's something that I found to be a really good hack in Midjourney, guys, is producing a triptych, because you get that consistent lighting all throughout. You get that same character all throughout. And then let's say like I was happy with this result and the specific coat in question was very good, then I would simply just crop each of these frames and use the Midjourney edit tool, change the specific aspect ratio if I needed to for a client. But that's how it would typically look, because it's very difficult to get the exact same consistency when you try and have multiple different images. You could of course do upscale vary and upscale creative. That works sometimes, but not all the time, especially if the garment is very, shall we say, demanding with the amount of detail that it has within it. It can be very difficult to do. So that's a hack there, to use triptych and then just crop them to have multiple different angles, if you like, of the subject. Then the next one is having a camel rib turtleneck and charcoal jeans. So for this one, I went with lighting, camera and frame. This was an eye level studio portrait of a model in a camel rib knit turtleneck and fitted charcoal jeans, soft key light at 45 degrees, tight vertical crop. So we can see she's like tightly in the frame, and 45-degree angle of her face, so that side is lit up, but that side is a little bit darker in terms of the shadow, especially under her eyebrow there. So that's using that specific lighting technique, and it's adhered very well to what I said with the camel rib knit turtleneck. It's done that wonderfully, and then it's also adhered to the, of course, fitted charcoal jeans that she's got on. I made that into a video here on Kling, as you can see. So there, can quickly see that. For those of you that are curious, this was the prompt for that. So I don't know if you guys can see right now, but that's the prompt and the negative prompt as well. Okay, and then we get into this one. This is my favorite out of the bunch. So this is a charcoal silk blouse and tapered trousers. I've gone with camera, attire and lighting here. And the prompt for this is the final image, by the way. I'll show you what Midjourney initially did and then what steps I had taken briefly. I'll explain those steps to get this particular final result. So this is a seated 3/4 view, matte charcoal silk blouse and camel trousers, single rim light to catch the silk sheen. So we can see there's quite a bit of sheen coming there in her waist on that particular blouse that she's wearing. And then there's a good amount of lighting there. But that wasn't actually showing that much in the original image, so I had to change it. This was the original image. Very white background, we can see. And it's not that visible in terms of the light. It's very, very bright and white, the whole image. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to give it a really kind of rustic feel, like kind of like a Ralph Lauren, like kind of high-end editorial feel. So that's what I did there. And of course, I changed it quite a bit with the color. I added in a lot of grain. This was done, first I upscaled it with gigapixel, and then within Lightroom Classic I'd created 6 different masks so I could control her face and the color of that, the background, the color of that, and then also her clothes as well. So that's what the result there was of that. That's the Midjourney original on the left, and then that's what the upscaled version was. Of course, there's no skin pores in her face, which is a problem. So I would look to add that in afterwards. That's quite a lengthy process to do. But this was as like 80% of the way there to being commercially ready, I would say. Then you get the number 4, which is the Sage Rib Knit midi dress. So this is using frame, lighting, and attire. And we've gone with a full-length studio shot of a woman wearing a muted sage rib knit dress, mini dress, large softbox for even light and generous white space. So if I zoom in there, you can see there's quite a lot of detail on her face. And on this one, I did add some grain to her face, as well as ensure that the base image that we had on Midjourney was fairly good to begin with as well. If I go up, it's actually really far up here. I made it even into a video as well. But go in, yeah. So all of these images, and then I picked one of these, can't remember which one it was. Yeah, there you go. And so that was the original image. And then of course I upscaled it. I did some color correction and I was able to get that result. This was the original, of course. Then the upscaled version. So it's already made a difference in terms of her face, in terms of making it clearer with the gigapixel upscale. And then this was the Lightroom version. So making the colors pop a bit more, making her hands feel a little bit better in terms of detail there, although it's still not quite perfect, but I think it's a noticeable improvement compared to what Midjourney gave us, where the colors are more muted and they're not as vibrant. Okay, now in terms of some rules when dealing with omni reference then and using Midjourney, so you want to use 50 most of the time when you are doing just a shoulder level up for your character. Shoulder level up, you just want to use 50 most of the time. Because when you try to go up on the omni reference and you, let's say you want like a full body shot of the character, you're not going to get the best of results. Okay, you will see my botched results at the bottom if I scroll here. First, let's try to do a lot of her with the outfits, but I wasn't getting the greatest results. But then it's not until I started using higher omni weight values, like omni weight 70, omni weight 80, that I started to get more consistency overall and her showing her whole figure as well. So that's something to pay attention to. Yeah, omni weight 70, and then stylize as well is really important. So when you combine omni weight 50 or 70 with stylized 50 or 100, you typically get the best results. I like to use a 1-to-1 ratio, so that would be omni weight 70 or 80 and stylized 70 or 80. That ensures that there's really good cohesion between the face, but then also in what she's wearing as well as, of course, how much of her she's showing. Like if you want a 3/4 shot of her from the knees up, it's more likely to adhere to that prompt if you use a 1-to-1 ratio and you lock in omni reference of like 70 or so or 80, and you combine that with style reference of 70 or 80 as well. You can experiment with the EXP value of 1 and 2. I did do that, and I was getting a bit more pop to my images, but then it started to look a little bit, let's say, artificial as well. Like here, I went really high on the stylized value, but then I also did an example where I used the EXP value as well, like EXP2. So you can see it's more vibrant, but it's almost too vibrant. You know, it doesn't, like, there will be a lot of color correction to do to like tame it down a notch. And the detail on the face is not as good as my later images when I didn't use EXP. So if I go up to that, you'll see that. So these were not using EXP, and we can already tell these are much better images. Even the detail on her face as well, much better images. In fact, it was very simple. I just used stylized 50. I didn't use EXP. Stylized 50, omni weight about 50 as well, and it retained those specific standard. It retained that specific standard there. So that's an example there. So use stylized 50 to 100 max for realism with a flat lay of the outfit you're intending for your character to wear as the style reference image. And always remember, the more parameters you add, the less of an impact your prompt will have. So it's always a delicate balancing act. No more than 2 other parameters concurrently when using omni reference. So no more than no exp and stylize. So basically 2 parameters, exp and stylize, but nothing more on top of that. It's just your omni weight, exp or stylize, but nothing more on top of those. So always keep that in mind. And then in terms of a quality standpoint, you want to zoom in 100% to your images to check the hands, the eyes, and the fabric. I can't tell you the amount of times I was prompting with Anya. I thought everything was good, but her hands were just messed up, completely messed up. Let me find you an example here. Because I see some people prompt and like as much as everything looks good, the hands are just messed up. Like, what on earth, you know? That's not commercially ready. Like the sleeve, her blouse is basically blended into her forearm, and it's made it really strange. The face is great, but then you get this a lot, and so that's why I, of course, apply the 1% rule, where you prompt so much, and then you start to pick the best images that don't typically have that, because there, the hands are messed up again. You know, she's great otherwise, but yeah, it's a real mess up. And then when you do have it, unfortunately, there's not enough detail in her jeans. So the garments would need retouching as well. So that can be a real issue. So yeah, that's just something to pay attention to there. You want to make sure you zoom in, you check absolutely every detail. At least prompt 100 times before you select one image. That's my rule anyway. And then also ensure that the light direction matches across the frames. That's why I use that idea of triptych. So you include one character in multiple different settings, so side view, front view, and back view typically, and then you don't have to prompt again. You just crop each part of that frame, and let's say it's a 2:3 aspect ratio, that's according to the brief. You just do one set of prompting, and you would get, of course, multiple different aspect ratios there that you'd be able to use. Use the edit mode as well to, of course, change out those aspect ratios, as well as add more to the image, like I did for the main image that you saw at the start of this document. Okay, so let's get into a scenario now. Like, we've gone over the visuals, and that's great, but ultimately you guys want revenue, right? Either you want revenue generated for your clients that you're delivering these Midjourney stills for, or if you are a business owner yourself and you're exploring Midjourney for the first time, you of course want these assets to replace the current process that you have. That could be a very bloated process, and in fact it is a bloated process. So here's what I found you should be aiming for when it comes to at least the Instagram platform. So you should be aiming for a 2% engagement on your consistent character posts, because that's when Instagram then starts to feed it across its algorithms or across its specific pages and in its suggested feeds, and also on the explore page it starts to feature your content there more. You want to post fresh carousels weekly. That rhythm alone has helped my clients grow from 2 to 4% monthly, even without paid ad support. Typically, I do paid ads with Meta and Google, but even without that, just purely from an organic perspective, if you don't have that much budget, it's really good to do carousels, especially because they always outperform just singles images. Then reels that showcase your product or service in a clear, well-paced and visually engaging way, together with a strong caption, is really good for sparking initial interest and getting people to go to your specific landing page and your specific product page here. So this is an example of a product page, right? So you'd have like an Instagram carousel with loads of images of the particular character in question in a consistent way, and then you'd of course get them onto the particular product page. And if you can launch campaigns within 72 hours or even a week at the worst, you stay agile with testing creatives faster, adapting quicker, and keeping your brand visible. So let's go back to the 11.5K savings that you would have saved, let's say, because a traditional photo shoot, of course, as we alluded to before, is between 12 to 16K. Now, with a Midjourney package like this, you're looking at only 4.5K. So that, of course, gets you 11.5K of savings. Let's say you're 16K you've only spent 4.5K, that's 11.5K savings. So what could you do with that? Where could you put that into ads, and what kind of difference would that make? So in advertising, you get something called CPC. Now, this is cost per click. So out of the out of the people that have seen your ad, how much does it cost for you to get a click from that person, like an earned click, right? So if you put 11.5K into a campaign, that would buy you 25,000 clicks. And that's like a meta-based benchmark from 2024 to 2025. All of the particular sources they'll be included within this particular document here. So these ain't made up, they're real. You go on that, take me to multiple sources. So these are real stats that I've pulled out here, okay, across like Facebook and Pinterest and all other stats. These are real. So you can expect 45 cents cost per click, and then that would buy you 25,000 clicks, and then a 2% in conversion rate on that would mean roughly $500. Now let's say your AOV, which is your average order value, typically how much do you sell your products for on your store, is $140. Now that's quite standard for, let's say, a mid-range or a luxury end boutique in e-commerce, around $140. That's roughly $70,000 in added revenue in this model scenario there. So from the money that you would have sunk into a traditional photo shoot or of 11.5K, you've now invested it into paid ads on Meta at 45 cent cost per click with a 2% conversion rate at 500 orders from 25,000 clicks and an average AOV, average order value of $140 for your SKUs. That's roughly $70,000 in added revenue. So let's say you didn't do that, because that's quite an optimistic scenario, right? 70K, you might say. So let's say you just hit half that, 35K. That'd still be a lot of money that you would have generated. That's double your entire shoot investment. Let's say 16K to do a traditional shoot, and you got half of those results of 70K, so you only got 35K. That's still a really good figure, of course. Above is, of course, as well, I want to caveat that it's a benchmark scenario, but it is based on real stats, industry benchmarks. So I'm just using these industry benchmarks here to piece together a scenario of what could happen as a business owner. Okay. And lastly, of course, if you want to book in a free discovery call with myself and you're interested in what I've gone through here today, you can do so with the link. I'll be including a link to this specific guide that I've gone through in this particular live chat and in the description down below. So you can, of course, do that in due course. The first call will just be an exploratory call. We'll be talking about your business, you know, what you want to achieve in the next 90 days, both commercially and creatively, what kind of products are you launching, when do you want to get the assets ready by, and then if my team and I can put that together for you, then we'll have a follow-up call from there and talk more logistics. So that's everything now, and if you guys have any questions about what we've gone through today, you can ask me now. I'm going to be sticking around for about a minute or so, but other than that, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon if you don't already say anything in the chat. So yeah. Okay, seems like there's no questions, so I'm going to leave it here, but thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, peace.